What are the most significant challenges that practitioners face when accessing chemistry education research?
I think it's a crime that high school educators and practitioners don't typically have open access for something like JChem Ed. Connection is probably the most significant challenge. Realizing that there are ways to access journal articles, research based practices that can increase their ability to dig into chemistry with students. One of the big epiphanies I've had as both a practitioner and a researcher has been the fact that research can be implemented. So I am a high school and college chemistry educator based out of Colorado Springs, Colorado. Have been teaching at my alma mater, the high school that I graduated from about 23 years ago, which has been a surreal and really humbling experience to be back in the same classroom where I first was exposed to some really challenging chemistry. And I'm sure my previous AP teacher, who I ended up succeeding, would say I was a perfectly mediocre chemistry student in this classroom. And now I love to give back and encourage the students who, like me, maybe don't see themselves as being a chemist or an educator or embracing quote unquote hard chemistry and hard sciences, and love the opportunity to really encourage those students and show them that trying hard and not necessarily getting it right away isn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't study chemistry. I know that was a big paradigm shift for me. I assumed that if I wasn't immediately good at it, then I shouldn't do it. So spent half of my 20s floundering around trying to figure out what was my goal and my passion until I came back into chemistry.
Thank you for introducing yourself and for all the work that you do. I really feel that practitioners have so much on their plate, and it's phenomenal what you've done with spinning all of yours.
Definitely a plate spinning competition all the time.
What are the most significant challenges that practitioners face when accessing chemistry education research, and how can these challenges be addressed?
This is such a hugely important question. Engaging with colleagues, I feel lucky in that I have bridged both sides of high school and college chemistry education, having worked as an adjunct faculty member at a college now for 5 years, as well as teaching in the high school level for over 10. And being able to work with faculty who are strictly academic on the college track, have done research, either chemical research or chemical education research, and also with colleagues at the high school level who have no chemistry background at all, but are teaching chemistry because that's what's been asked of them. And seeing the fact that practitioners in a high school classroom struggling through either adapting or developing their own chemistry curriculum and not knowing where to look. And then when they do, being hit by obstacle after stumbling block, after just scary gates that they run into, whether it be accessing a ACS or JChem Ed journal or somewhere else, or not even knowing where to start. So I think that it's been a huge goal of mine as someone who has been able to publish in some chemical education journals and who has had access to BCCE conferences and ACS conferences and been really well connected in the chemical education field, that I've loved being able to be that outreach source and help some of my colleagues overcome some of those obstacles. I'm constantly using my ACS membership to print out articles and send them to my colleagues. And I shudder to think what it must be like at high schools where there's nobody who has any connections or any access like that. I think it's a crime that high school educators and practitioners don't typically have open access for something like JChem Ed. Even the American Association of Chemistry Teachers, which I've been a huge proponent of and been lucky to have been connected with since the beginnings of my teaching career, it has a fee to be a member and to access research and curriculum, which I certainly support and have gladly paid that fee, and have generally been able to encourage my schools to sponsor other teachers to get that fee paid for every year. But I'm sure that there are, for every one school like mine, hundreds of schools out there that either can't or don't even know about those resources. So connection is probably the most significant challenge. Realizing that there are ways to access journal articles, research-based practices that can increase their ability to dig into chemistry with students and make chemistry just more interesting and accessible and fun for students of all ability levels and ages.
You mentioned knowing where to start and the connections that you've built from your perspective. How did you go about doing that? And what has worked best for you?
Yeah, it's been a two-sided approach. For me, it was both I just was lucky enough to connect with some people at the state level in Colorado who were pretty heavily connected in the chemistry education field. The Colorado Association of Science Teachers and the Colorado Chemistry Teachers Association I got connected with as a student teacher. And they kind of opened my mind and my ideas of how to connect more collaborative activities and connect with other teachers at large. And then also, ironically, through Twitter. Twitter was an amazing way to connect with chemistry teachers from all over the US and indeed all over the world. I now consider myself lucky to have friends that are chemistry faculty and researchers in Ireland, all over Europe, and all over the United States, and have over the last decade grown to consider them some of my closest friends. And even we refer to ourselves as hashtag ChemFam, getting together at conferences and seeing each other, but also just sending text messages and emails throughout the work week to encourage one another, to share resources has been a huge benefit. Both of those ways of getting connected were monumentally life changing for me.
What I'm hearing is the value of community and spaces where community can be built in terms of bridging these gaps that exist between researchers and practitioners. So I would like to ask, how can professional learning communities or other spaces like the cuvette, where there's spaces for practitioners and researchers to connect, share, and post projects for collaboration, help dissolve these top-down dissemination models and other barriers in access, with one of more co-creative spirit between researchers and practitioners?
That's a great question. One of the more transformative experiences I've had has been connecting with researchers at the college level that are more experienced and more adept at navigating publishing articles in JChemEd or other research journals. I connected with Dr. Tom Kunzelman in Michigan at Spring Arbor College, and he helped guide me through the process of publishing an article together. He is very well published and well connected in the community and was such a huge impact. So I think having those mentor relationships is really important, either guided by an organization like the Cuvette or AACT. I know that they have a science coaches program because that can help lower the activation energy, if you will, to get to publication and accessing publications. I know the publications for someone who is just a practitioner and hasn't had any professional research experience can be really intimidating to read, and having that mentorship ability and being able to be connected with one or maybe in a small group of practitioners and researchers is really vitally important. Otherwise, I think it can be like drinking from a fire hose. When I've connected through networking opportunities at conferences or even dip my toes into the sphere at large, it can be pretty overwhelming because there's so many people that are really passionate about what they do, whether they are practitioners or researchers, that it can be really scary to approach someone and say, "Hey, I'm really interested in what you're doing. Can you tell me more?" So having those closer mentor relationships, mentor mentee relationships is really important.
Thank you so much for communicating that, for highlighting mentors who have really had a positive impact on you as well as various communities. It's really helpful. I'd like to take your response in terms of lessening the intimidation factor around reading, accessing, and writing one's research and highlight that for a moment because a lot of the literature that's out there about bridging the researcher practitioner gap highlights action research, where our teachers are empowered to do the research in their classroom. What changes to how science education research articles are written could be made so that they're more practitioner inclusive and lessen the initial intimidation factor in just reading the research?
That's a great question. One of the big epiphanies I've had as both a practitioner and a researcher has been the fact that research can be implemented today, tomorrow. And I think as I was beginning my career, reading through research articles, doing a literature review for my own research, I encountered a lot of research that seemed esoteric and locked away in, yeah, this is great questions. These are great ideas. This is great data, but how can it be implemented? And being able to access it in a way to be actionable. In my grad school experience, my thesis was all based on action research, stuff that I was doing with my students, could implement, could adapt, and could interact with that data on a real day-to-day basis. And I think once practitioners see that effect and see that ability, it is life-changing, because rather than all of this sort of behind a castle wall kind of research data, they see student responses and movements within their classroom that can be implemented right away within their curriculum and what they're doing in their classroom, and presenting it in such a way that it is more accessible. And I think that paradigm shift needs to happen more broadly in terms of educational research. So much of it, I think, is presented in, if you'll pardon the phrase, an old school method that is widely accepted by journal articles and widely accepted by researchers, but is either inaccessible or is hard to see the application for practitioners. If practitioners can see, it's not that it's being dumbed down, but that it's being applied and applicable immediately, whether that be activities or suggestions, ways to practice this within a classroom, ways to use that to expand innovation that's happening in practitioners' classrooms. That's hugely important and something that I think is lacking in a lot of more traditional educational research articles.
Thank you for that. I really liked the concept of what is widely accepted and how that can present barriers for whether or not science education research can even be implemented in the very context it was designed to study.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the honor and privilege to be asked to join the editorial review board for JChem Ed this year. And it's been really cool to look behind the curtain and see some of the research proposals and research articles and drafts that are being sent out, and reading them and approaching it from the perspective of a practitioner. And I find that when I read drafts that get sent to me for review, I find myself asking, how could I use this in my classroom? And what questions do I need from this research to apply it to my work and to my students? And I think that is a really valuable set of questions, both for researchers and for people approaching research articles, what they need to be thinking about when they approach research and bodies of research that are already out there, as well as thinking about their own implementation research in the future.
If you could wave a wand and change the way science education research is written to begin with, what are some adaptations that you would make it more
Oh man, I find myself like reaching for my red pen for my wand. I think that it's all about application. I think that if research is written from a perspective of reaching a deeper understanding, which I think it does already, but also what is the point of that understanding? What can we implement for our students to allow that deeper understanding and that new novel way of going about chemistry education that can be applied today? Literally, I want to be able to read a research article and immediately be thinking, what can I change in my lesson tomorrow to apply some of these novel things that I've learned from this article? How can I adapt a lesson, a lab, an assessment to reflect the new, deeper understanding that I've arrived at through reading this research article that will allow my students to access chemistry materials and content more deeply? That's hugely important. I'm so excited about the practice aspect because education truly is a practice. It's something that if you don't get a chance to flounder around and fail and adapt and retry and reteach, you can't possibly understand the limitations and the successes of what you do in your classroom. Having that highlighted in writing guidelines is so important for practitioners because they need to see how they can apply it and how it can fit into their classroom today, tomorrow, whatever. And that's something that's lacking in a more of a traditional IMRAD style of journal article. So I think if practitioners can see how can I take this and try it out and play with it, that's really important. I know that's important for my students, and it's certainly important for me to have that content, that idea, and go play, go try.
In your opinion, since we're thinking about formats and structures that we can use, can you elaborate on the structural supports or barriers that are available to practitioners in engaging with reading research, but also, like you mentioned, writing research and publishing it?
Yeah, I think that having mentorship, as I mentioned before, is so important. And I think that guidance from people who have had more experience doing literature reviews, accessing and reading journal articles can be, as I mentioned before, pretty intimidating for a practitioner who already has so much work on their caseload. I know it's a perverse pleasure that I get knowing that I've got a stack of research articles sitting on my desk at home that I look forward to having a break so I can read those and really don't even have the mental brain space to access them during a school week or a busy semester. So I think having maybe even like reading clubs, journal reading clubs, say, hey, this week, me and five other practitioners and some kind of mentor could read this article and discuss
Oh,
its
really?
findings. Having that guidance and that collaboration, as we've already mentioned, is so vitally important in just professional development as both a practitioner and a researcher. Having that in how you access research, I think, could be really valuable as well.
Thank you for that. In your experience in developing and benefiting and providing these connections and collaborations, how receptive have chemistry education researchers been to connect with practitioners?
That's a great question. And I have had a mixed experience, honestly. I have had some amazing connections with researchers who are so excited to talk with, to connect with, to work with practitioners, somebody who gets to be surrounded by a bunch of teenage chemistry learners all the time. They're really excited to have literally just a classroom full of test subjects to try out new things and a teacher who's passionate about bringing research based ideas towards their students. At the same time, I have gotten a lot of pushback or a haughty, oh, you're just a teacher feeling.
Okay.
Yeah, running into those kind of obstacles or that attitude has been pretty frustrating. Thankfully, that seems to be slowly changing. I feel like there is definitely a wave towards that attitude going away and realizing that having people who are practicing what they are researching and being connected to those practitioners is really vitally important. In a recent editorial that I wrote for JChem Ed, I had to laugh at the fact that CER and that acronym are two completely different things to practitioners and to researchers. Researchers, of course, that describes what they do, chemical education research. And CER at the practitioner level is a way to allow students to write a really good scientific conclusion through doing claim, evidence, and reasoning. And what better way to personify the divide that we can be having a conversation that I saw this happen at BCCE last year, where a practitioner and a researcher were having a conversation about CER, and it took them about 5 minutes to realize that they were talking about something completely different. So a pretty impactful difference there between practitioner and researchers, but I think it's something that's so valuable to overcome and to change that paradigm and make it more a cooperative relationship.
What are some of the other things that you would love to publish if you could?
I think science communication and just having, even beyond the research and practitioner sphere, allowing more general public to understand and access chemistry, have a deeper understanding of the world around them. I think that's vitally important and helps break down the stigma of science and chemistry in general, makes people realize that They don't have to be a Nobel Prize winning scientist to appreciate and to access and to understand and enjoy chemistry because it helps explain everything from the lunch that they ate to the weather outside to the fabric of the clothing they're wearing. And just having a more rich understanding and appreciation for the world around them makes practitioners' jobs easier, makes researchers' jobs more rich and more appreciated by the general public, and just helps combat the misinformation that is out there, regardless of the content.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Ryan. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to share this with the broader audience.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me.